If you find this show valuable, you can subscribe to the podcast version at swansignalpodcast.com and to our YouTube channel at youtube.com/swansignal. Got a brand new coat of paint on that YouTube channel. It's looking beautiful. Thanks to our designer, Jorn Ruder, for that. Swan Signal is a production of Swan Bitcoin. It's the best way to accumulate Bitcoin with automatic recurring buys. It's as easy as it gets. 1, you auto fund USD. 2, you auto stack. We auto stack the BTC for you. And 3, we auto withdraw that BTC for you if you so choose. Otherwise, it's held by a regulated custodian. Fully cold storage. You can use the URL swanbitcoin.com/bitcoinze. Which is the ref link for our guest today, one of our guests today, Isaiah Jackson. When you sign up for Swan, you can get $10 of free BTC dropped into your account. And of course, you'll support Isaiah's work as he will earn some sats as well. And speaking of our referral program, it's called Swan Force. You can sign up for it as well. swanbitcoin.com/enlist. You'll get a custom landing page with an avatar, a custom message to welcome your referrals to Swan. And you get this, 0.25% of every Swan plan purchase that your referrals make for up to 3 years. It's huge. And then, of course, they get $10 of BTC. Everybody wins. And it's important to note, you don't need to be in the United States to be a member of the Swan Force. You can shill to US-based customers and sign them up, and we'll pay you in sats wherever you are in the world. So check that out, swanbitcoin.com/enlist. Okay, today we have with us Isaiah Jackson. He's the author of Bitcoin and Black America, and he is a Bitcoiner, man. We're excited to hear from him today. Welcome, Isaiah.
Oh yeah, glad to be here. Glad to be on this platform. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely, man. And of course, we have the one and only Max Keiser. He's host of the Keiser Report. Welcome, Max.
Yeah, hey everybody. Great to be here.
And we're also joined by Jason Don. You'll know him better as Brecky von Bitcoin. He's creative director at Swan. Welcome, Breck. How's it going?
Going well. Thanks for having me. And Max, I have to say, as usual, your sunglasses are amazing, and I want them.
Yeah, it's all available in the Swan merchandise store.
Maybe coming soon.
That's swanbitcoin.com/max.
There you go. Hey, and Max, congratulations on getting your handle back.
Yeah, fantastic. The Swan people, they're so attuned with everything that's great in the universe. They helped me to get my original Max Keiser Twitter handle back. So thanks so much, Swan, Team Swan.
All right. That's awesome. Glad we could get that back at Max Keiser. So the at real Max Keiser handle is now Max's alter ego, but he'll be tweeting back on Max Keiser. All right. All right, there's lots to talk about here. Let's start out with talking about one of Isaiah's tweets that he tweeted out a little bit ago on June 1st. And it read like this: "I'm not saying Bitcoin can stop police violence, but when the smoke clears, we need an economic solution to make our community self-sufficient. Bitcoin has to be a part of that strategy because of censorship resistance, scarcity, and remittance payments." Isaiah, let's discuss this idea a bit deeper, how Bitcoin might be able to help make a difference for Black Americans on this front. How can Bitcoin help Black America economically?
Absolutely. So, when I wrote the book and some of the work that I've done, one of the things that I saw is that a lot of Black Americans don't have any leverage in this economy and don't have any sort of plan B if this economy goes to shit. And everybody needs that plan B. And I think Bitcoin is that solution. And unfortunately, we haven't had as much traction as we should have over the years. However, that is picking up. And the reason I wrote that tweet and put it out is because at a time like now, people are, unemployed, 40 million unemployed, money printer go burr, or bruh. The Fed is just printing trillions of dollars. We need to exit from this economic system, and in our community especially so, we should be at the forefront because we have seen nothing that indicates that it's going to work for us in the long term. So I wrote that tweet because yes, the riots, the protests, getting your voice out is good, But economically, if it doesn't change, then we'll be doing the same thing next year.
Absolutely, man. Max, you got to take on this front?
Right. Well, Bitcoin is unconfiscatable. That's an important attribute for America's Black community, because they unfortunately have had their wealth confiscated time and time again. And we see it, for example, in the 2008 financial crisis, when the biggest loser were Black homeowners who had their homes basically stolen by banks, and who were making all those fraudulent loans to begin with. And the decision was made to bail out the banks, not the people who were victims of the fraudulent loans that were made by those banks. And so the history of Black America is a history of perpetual disenfranchisement. And so Bitcoin is unconfiscatable. So that's a key attribute. It's money that once you put it into a cold wallet, that's not going to be confiscated. That I think that point has got to be driven home, because the Black community lives in a hostile environment, right? This is the white political system is, when it's described as a system of white supremacy, that's not incorrect. That is correct. So this is the first time ever Black communities got a chance to amass wealth that's unconfiscatable.
Did we lose you guys? Nope, we're still there.
I was just waiting for you to jump in, Brett.
Yeah, I mean, to kind of like add to that, basically something that I think is also an important aspect of it is the opt-in nature of it. Like, one of my biggest aha moments was when I was just writing things out and I was realizing it's like, I never chose to use the dollar. People around the world, they didn't choose to use their national currencies. They didn't choose central banks. They didn't choose any of the quantitative easing. Bitcoin is a choice. I choose to use Bitcoin every single day. I choose to hold it every single day. Whether you realize it or not, you're making a choice to either hold it or not to hold it. If you've heard of Bitcoin, you're making a choice whether you realize it or not. And choice is power, and the ability to make a choice is powerful. And that's part of why I think Bitcoin is so incredible, because it gives you that power. So to disenfranchised communities, take the power where you can,
I hear that, man. I hear that. Isaiah, in your book, Bitcoin and Black America, in chapter 4, it seems appropriate to bring it up now. It's titled Buck the Fanks. And, I recognize that Max has got the shirt on right there. That he hasn't flipped the letters, though. It's just straight up.
Yeah, I was trying to make it kid friendly.
I appreciate that.
But version, fuck the banks.
Yep, there you go. So yeah, in that chapter, you detail instances where banks have taken advantage of Black Americans. Could you run through some of those examples? Max gave one kind of broadly with the 2008 financial crisis. Banks really took advantage there, but I know that there's some specific examples you lay out there. How is the legacy financial system biased against Black Americans in particular?
Oh yeah, so the legacy financial system we see today has done numerous things. In my book, I outline a few. The biggest one being, or the two biggest ones being, loan discrimination and redlining. These two things have taken a massive amount of wealth out of the Black community, or not even allowed them to get that wealth. For those who don't know what redlining is, banks basically subjected Black people to live in one area that was never going to increase in property value, simply because they put all of the shit nobody wants near them, nuclear power waste. They build highways straight through their neighborhood. The trucking companies, they sit in these areas so that property taxes are never ever going to actually go up. So the banks had a hand in doing that in the 1940s and 50s. Also, loan discrimination. A lot of people think that the problems Black people have, it's old. That's slavery and Jim Crow. That's back in the day. And I specifically put examples from 2012 up to now. So we're talking about in the last 10 years, these are the discrimination loans or discriminatory loans that banks have made, and they've had to pay off, either out of court or go to court for them. One of the specific ones is the Bank of America scandal, where they put, I believe it was 50,000 fake bank accounts just so they could get a good bonus. And a lot of people, my mom was affected by that, because, because she had an old, I believe an old account with Wachovia, and I'm sorry, I said Bank of America, but it's Wells Fargo. They're all shit, but it was Wells Fargo. She had an old account with Wachovia, and they used the data from back in the 90s to fake an account, and then she got notices that that she had a new credit card account. And it's crazy to see because they got away with it. They paid off everybody. And, everybody just kind of forgot about it. But I wanted to outline specifically that the banks that you see every day, they don't give a shit about you. They're going to carry out their mission, which is to take your money and use it as they please. They don't actually have the money that they say. We all know, they only need 10% of the money that they claim they have in the bank. So all of these things that I outlined in chapter 4 are basically to show you that we should turn our back on banks completely and come up with a new solution. Bitcoin to me is that solution, and there should be no question about it. I mean, I don't think there's a majority of Black people who are like, yeah, I would rather go with a bank. Not really. They just don't have a choice. But now that they do, we're presenting that to them now.
Nice. Brecky, did you want to weigh in?
I think he said it perfectly right there.
Right. Yeah. I mean, in the chapter, there's, quite a few other examples, and it's undeniable what has happened, and especially with these very clear examples, and it goes back a lot farther than that too, through history, like Isaiah was talking about, being like when banks would not give loans to Black Americans if they were applying for loans to live in a certain part of the country, right? It used to be suburbs, things changed, but that denied Black Americans the ability or the chance to invest in real estate that would have gone up in value in maybe different ways, right? Or to, just have other opportunities on that front. So I appreciate that, sharing that. Let's dive a little bit deeper into, you, Isaiah, called Bitcoin the answer, right? So let's discuss the idea that Bitcoin might be able to make a difference for Black Americans. What specifically, like obviously we have the confiscation resistance that we talked about, and opting out of the banking system. What do you think we need to do? How does Bitcoin need to develop to make this a serious opt-out option, like as soon as possible?
Oh yeah, so there are a lot of companies, third-party companies, who have worked to increase onboarding. Because when I first started, and I'm sure when Max first started, Brecky, you, Brady as well, Bitcoin was very much the Wild West. It was very techy, and you kind of had to know what you're doing. But now we have on-ramps, third parties that can bring people on to exchanges like Swan, or to other places where they can purchase Bitcoin regularly. And going forward, what I would like to see from the Black community is that we embrace it. And the reason we should embrace it is because, for one, censorship resistance, but it solves problems that directly affect us. So in the Black community, everybody is not Black and American. We have a lot of Caribbean, we have a lot of people from African countries, Zimbabwe, Ghana, who come here and are considered, they are Black, but they're not technically Black Americans. So remittances is another thing. The exorbitant amounts with MoneyGram and Western Union, that should be gone. They're just as shitty as banks. Get them out of here. So being able to send money back home for a smaller fee is something that is specific to our community, as well as having our institutions such as the Black Church collect Bitcoin for investment or for donation to keep as an asset long term. So specifically, Bitcoin solves problems that we specifically have, not just on a broad level. It is, we're fighting the Fed and we don't want money printing, but it specifically solves those problems. And if we move forward from a store value to a medium of exchange, at that point, you start to see, hey, we can separate completely. And then, maybe 10 years from now, a unit of account to where we have completely separated and we have, this international global currency moving. So I think that's the process of how Black people should see Bitcoin and the problems that it solves specifically.
Nice. How are you using Bitcoin today? Are you using it as a medium of exchange, at least from time to time?
All the time. I have about 70% of my holdings in Bitcoin. And well, actually, as far as cryptocurrency, 90% of it is Bitcoin, but 70% of my money is in Bitcoin and cryptocurrency. I don't just talk about it. I literally live it. I've bought so much stuff with Bitcoin over the years. Some businesses have gone away. Shout out to gift.io. I used to use them a lot. But other businesses have popped up. Lolly, they give you free sats for shopping, doing what you do. Fold app, you can purchase from Starbucks, Target. I've done it a million times purchasing with
Mm-hmm.
Bitcoin. So yeah, I use it all the time. Cheap air to buy flights. Bitcoin as a medium of exchange is used. There are some things that can be fixed, but I think Lightning Network, as long as and also future development will solve that. If you think Bitcoin is done as far as development, you don't know technology. We have a long way to go. So payments will get better. Some fees are a little bit, more, but I'm willing to accept that as long as we can show that medium of exchange works. Yep.
Absolutely, man. Max, what are the biggest impediments, in your opinion, to Bitcoin being adopted as a medium of exchange?
Right. So where we see Bitcoin being adopted right now and with great urgency would be in countries like Venezuela, Argentina, countries around the world that are experiencing hyperinflation, countries that are already coming under extreme stress because banks are failing and the fiat money system is failing. And that has always been a big driver of Bitcoin, and it always will be. Here in the United States, the Black community is a subset of the overall community that's experiencing extreme stress. Isaiah mentioned the loan discrimination and redlining. That's real. I mean, this got also gerrymandering is another political tool used to isolate and victimize communities like the Black community. And I call this interest rate apartheid, where interest rates are used to discriminate against. If you're a friend of Goldman Sachs, you can borrow money at 0%. Or if you're Jamie Dimon, they'll actually pay you to borrow money. Your borrowing costs are negative. If you're not a friend of Goldman Sachs, if you are in one of these other communities that are already being gerrymandered and politically discriminated against, your cost of borrowing, right off with a credit card, that's 20%. If you get behind on a payment, now you're in a payday lending situation, that's 3,000%, 5,000%, 10,000% annual rates of return. So your ability to rise above that is virtually zero. So it is an apartheid system. America lives in an interest rate apartheid system. Those who live on the wrong side of the wall of the Bantustan, primarily the Black community, in particular, are treated like their human rights are being violated every single day by the banks. If you don't live in that Bantustan, you live in another part of the town, then you get privileges that are not available to everybody else. So just to, that's the adoption rate is driven by need. And that's why I believe this Bitcoin and Black America book is so important and so vital, and why it's so popular and why it's gaining so much traction is because finally in the Black community in America, there's a way to escape the open air prisons that are these communities maintained by these corrupt bankers. So this is really a remarkable period that we're living in. And I think the Bitcoin adoption rate in America may be driven principally by the Black community because they're the ones that are the biggest victims of the banking industry.
What's interesting about these use cases, and something I like to highlight about Bitcoin, also sorry about the airplane noise, I just moved near an airport, but Bitcoin is what you want it to be. So for the disenfranchised communities that want to opt out, that want to create their own circular economies, they can do that, But at the same time, like if you're worried about wealth preservation, about being able to carry forward your money from generation to generation and build and do low time preference activities, Bitcoin works for that reason too. Like I transact in Bitcoin, I buy things all the time using the Lightning Network, but like Isaiah, like a lot of my wealth is I'm storing in Bitcoin. So I think, people need to sort of accept that and accept that it'll be used in different ways. And, Bitcoin adoption in America, let's say, like it will be as varied as America is. And that's a good thing. Yeah, that's what I got.
Yeah, I mean, for me, one of the biggest impediments is tax policy, and I really hope that we can get some change on that front. It's just so onerous right now, and one of the reasons I love Lightning Network is that it's just harder, to like track those payments, right? And maybe easier to not have to report them. I don't know, but like, it's everyone should obviously report. I just you know, I hope we see legislation change on that front. And I would really like to see some political will built up to change that. What other changes could we see politically, legislatively, as we for Bitcoin that would be pro Bitcoin, as we have seen some Bitcoiners, you know, in Congress already? What do you think? What do you think, Zay?
Well, in my opinion, the best thing they can do is leave us the fuck alone. Like, just leave us to our own bearings. If you think we're going to fail, then just leave us alone and let us fail. Because we've, you know, Bitcoiners who have been here long enough have seen Bitcoin die 1,000 times. We've seen the articles. We've seen politicians talk about how it's used for criminals. The best thing you can do is just leave us alone. As far as regulation, Bitcoin, you know, itself really can't be regulated. You can regulate the on-ramps, you can regulate the exchanges, you can try and regulate some of the people, but really, if you leave Bitcoiners alone, we build our own economy by ourselves and we self-regulate. I think we do a good job of that, of self-regulating some of the scammers, getting them out of here, some of the people who are doing terrible stuff. I think we do a pretty good job of that. I think leaving us alone is the best policy. And if a politician comes out and is like, yes, Bitcoin is not a government currency, but Bitcoin is software, let the people who deal with it, and we won't have any hands on. We won't touch it. We don't tax Bitcoin. Only when you change it back to cash, our money, then we will. But if you just leave Bitcoin to itself, I think that will be the best political strategy for somebody. Hopefully somebody comes with it. Most people, they like it, but they still want to find a way to connect it to a bank. But, you know, best thing to do is just hands off.
Max, you have a take on this?
Well, I don't see any government proposals adding anything of value to the current monetary policy that is Bitcoin. It's the hardest money ever created in history. It already has the ability to elevate the consciousness of those who are participating in it to a point where they see the current state of government as pathetic and useless. And what's going to happen, in my view, is that more and more folks in the government will become Bitcoiners and will leave government. The best thing they can do is quit their job as a senator, quit their job as a congressman, quit their job as a Federal Reserve Bank chairman, and get on with the revolution, because they're just, I think we're going to see more and more of that. You know, Bitcoin acts almost as a fifth column inside the government right now, where government regulators in particular, whose job it is to try to regulate Bitcoin. You remember, they're paid in fiat money, and that fiat money is becoming more worthless every day. Just like any revolution, once the cops and the regulators start to realize that they're being paid in worthless fiat money, they leave their jobs and they join the revolution. So, you know, look at the America's police force. From coast to coast, they're leaving the police force because they don't want to do that job anymore, because they're asked to do an impossible job, to defend an impossible currency. You know, 10, 20, 30% of those police leaving the police force are going to be stacking sats, and they're going to find freedom from this nightmare. So, you know, it doesn't matter what the government does. It's no longer relevant.
Yeah, I mean, there's only really one thing I think the government could do that would be good, and I don't think it would ever happen, and that's recognizing that trying to manage the economy is a bad thing. And I think we're just going to see the Fed keep trying and trying and trying until, you know, it's too late, and arguably it's already too late. So we'll see.
Addition by subtraction. Yeah, I hear that. And Max, I appreciate your words. Isaiah. Completely agree with you, Brecky. I want to take this moment here to play a video that not everyone may have seen yet, although it was very widely circulated, over 300,000 views on Twitter. This is at IAmTheCharacter on Twitter, posted this video where he is talking about Bitcoin at a protest. Let's bring it up here on the screen. All right, here we go.
Oh, Brady, I think we have no audio playing.
All
We
right,
have to
all right, all
restart.
right. Here we go. Here we go. My bad.
Build the suspense.
It's worth it. It's worth it. Let's see here. Okay, we're still going. I'm gonna have to stop the screen share and start over here from the beginning. And I think I got it. Click here. Here we go. Boom.
And all you need is a phone to start using it. I want everyone to please start learning about a new financial system. This system is called Bitcoin. It was created for this very purpose. So the elites do not have control of the financial system anymore. With Bitcoin, they cannot turn on a printing press and give our dollars to their friends for bailing them out because they weren't being responsible. You cannot bail people out. The elites cannot bail out their friends anymore. Please learn about this system. This system is called Bitcoin. It was created for this very purpose. A great resource is a man named Andreas Antonopoulos. You can look him up on YouTube. Please learn and support this system. You don't have to put all your money into it. Like my brother said earlier, you can put weekly $5, but we will no longer let the elites kill us with our own money. That is absurd.
All right, again, that is IAmCharacter at IAmTheCharacter on Twitter. Give him a follow. Very powerful words there. Max, you have used this this new phrase. At least it was new to me from your mouth. The term cantillionaires. All right, and in that protest speech there, IAmTheCharacter said that we need to please start learning about this new financial system. With Bitcoin, they cannot turn on a printing press and give our dollars to their friends for bailing them out. Of course, George Floyd was killed for the crime of counterfeiting a $20 bill, and the Fed at this time, in a crazy comparison, absolutely ironic, is printing trillions of dollars, most of which ends up in the hands of the very rich. So, Max, cantillionaires, can you explain this term that you've been using?
Right. Well, first of all, George Floyd was killed for allegedly passing a counterfeit $20 bill. Is my understanding. But the term cantillionaire came out of my frustration at people's referencing those in the elite class as elite, right? Those who are getting this money first are described as the elites. And I thought that's a misnomer. That's a bad word to describe this group of larcenistic scoundrels. So I thought cantillionaire is a good way to describe them, because it gets at the cantillon effect. Which has basically been documented in economics for a long time. The money printers really distribute the money through a network of their friends who use it first. A great example would be that banks use the money that is printed to buy back their own stock and make the executive stock options go up in value by 1,000 or 2,000%. Then they go out and they buy yachts and property on Park Avenue or expensive paintings and assets that continue to go up in value because they continue this scam of taking the money that comes off the presses of the central bank to buy back their own stock, which makes them instant billionaires. And then it trickles down like water trickling down a stream. By the time it gets down to the end of the stream, it's pretty dirty, it's useless, it loses its purchasing power, and you have this wealth and income gap that keeps getting wider and wider as a result of it. So the cantillionaire effect is becoming quite sharp. The wealth and income gap in America now is greater than it was during the robber baron period, during the 1880s and 1890s, when we saw the rise of the Carnegies and the Mellons and those robber baron families. That we have a much wider gap than we did then, and we see it on the street. So the street, we call it the global insurrection against banker occupation. The street protests, whether it's Occupy Wall Street, Black Lives Matter, Arab Spring, everywhere around the world, it's a rebellion against the cantillionaires. It's an international global insurrection against bankers, the banker occupation. And so that's what I mean by cantillionaire. They shouldn't be called elites or described positively in any way. just like you would never describe a parasite that's, or a flesh-eating amoeba. You wouldn't describe that as an elite amoeba or an elite virus, right? It's a disgusting flesh-eating virus that's killing you. This is how you have to understand the cantillionaires. That's a virus, there's a parasite that's eating the economy from the inside and destroying the economy, and they're incredibly dangerous and toxic.
Hey, Max, question for you. Do you think a lot of these people are knowingly doing this, or are they simply playing the system and they're incentivized to do so, and so they are?
We know that they're knowingly doing it because whenever the market drops 5%, they beg the printers to print more. What's that all about? When James Cramer goes on, CNBC during the 2008 crisis and literally gets on his knees and begs Ben Bernanke to print more money, it's disgusting display of cantillionaires begging their printing lords to bail them out of their losing positions. And now today, what Trump is literally, whenever the stock market goes down, he literally prostrates himself and begs Jay Powell to print more money, and he's begging them to go into negative interest rates. Okay, so we know that they understand the cause and effect. We know they do it on purpose. They know that they're ransacking the economy. It'd be like asking, did Bluebeard the pirate know that he's a pirate, right? Yeah, he knows he's a pirate. He wears a patch over his eye. He sails into town. He steals everybody money, and he sings, old songs because he's a pirate, right? There's nobody denies he's a pirate. He's a pirate. These guys are pirates. They know they're pirates. They engage in piracy. That's their job. That's who they are. That's what Bitcoin fights back against, because it's unconfiscatable. You can't take my treasure because it's unconfiscatable. It's immutable. It's uncensorable, and it gets rid of the pirates.
I don't know about you guys. I could listen to Max rant for hours upon hours upon hours.
All day, yeah. Let him go. Yeah, I love it.
Even if things get darker before they get brighter, I'm just glad we got the Max keeping us laughing here.
Oh yeah, and I want to comment on what you said, Max. The robber baron era, the late 1800s. A lot of people don't realize that the number one time for Black-owned businesses is now. The second biggest time was in the late 1800s. Before the currency got devalued by the Federal Reserve in 1913, we had Black Wall Street, you had Rosewood, you had Black Wall Street in Wilmington, in Florida, and Georgia. All of these communities were self-sufficient because the currency they used, it was a circular economy. They kept it within the community. People were able to gain wealth. And then we had the robber baron era onto the Federal Reserve, which messed us all up. But of course, we not only got our money debased, a lot of those communities got burned down. So literally brick and mortar burned down, as well as your money gets basically burned to the ground as well. So yes, those things have amazing effect long term because if those communities were able to stand 100 years, I'm pretty sure you would have a lot more prosperous places. So glad you pointed that out, Max. Yes, these people know what they're doing, definitely.
Yeah. Isaiah, could you, if you know more details about like Black Wall Street and the kind of communities they were just talking about, I'd love to hear more and have you share it with our listeners.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So, June 19th, Juneteenth, which is a celebration of when slavery, actually it was a celebration of when they told the slaves they were free. It was actually 2 years after it was passed, but Juneteenth is a celebration of that. And one of the places that is focused during this time is Tulsa, Oklahoma. That was one of the biggest communities where there were Black-owned banks, there were, hospitals, small businesses, everything. A circular economy, like we said. They supported themselves. They were fine. A lot of middle class people there. However, because the people across town, the white people who lived across town and the police were jealous, they literally burned their city to the ground. They killed hundreds, actually thousands, men, women, and children. This was not something, if you watch Watchmen, the show, a lot of people thought that was fake. There was outrage because they thought, why would you put this? This would never happen in American history. It was like, no, this has actually happened. People got killed. And the one thing I want people to understand is that we can create a digital economy today and you can't burn down Bitcoin. So good luck with that. And as far as brick and mortar businesses, you can also protect yourself a lot better today than you could back then. And in my opinion, that historical reference should be what we focus on going forward for prosperity, building businesses, and then also what we have to do to protect ourselves. So that is basically Black Wall Street in a nutshell, and we're trying to bring that back now. Just not Wall Street. I don't give a shit about Wall Street, but name it something else. But just a good middle class economy with small businesses. That's how the economy works.
How do you think Bitcoin might, allow that economy to exist like in an easier way than the fiat system that we have now? Do you think it'd be like more of a fertile ground for small and kind of medium-sized businesses as opposed to privileging, large corporations and creating corporate monopolies?
Absolutely. So the one thing I've proposed is that you can invest in small businesses using Bitcoin. And one of the things holding back is regulations. But in a perfect world, if you wanted to get investment as a business, and it's damn near impossible at a bank, but you had a good business plan and somebody had Bitcoin, literally 1 or 2 Bitcoins can get your business off the ground. And what can happen is from that point, you can pay your manufacturers in Bitcoin, and then they can pay who they need in Bitcoin. Then you start that circular economy. It takes time, but that is something that I want to see. And being able to get investment in Bitcoin in your company, you don't have to worry. You can get it from anybody in the world. Somebody from Russia, somebody from Zimbabwe, somebody from Canada could invest in you using Bitcoin without these regulations stopping you. And your business could just get started just like that. We're talking about a matter of minutes, not some convoluted going through lawyers, all that stuff that you have to do as far as raising money. So that's the vision I see long term, and I think that would be the ultimate win. It's just regulations wise, you're right. We have to jump through these minefields. Terrible.
Hey, Isaiah. So we've got a question from Chase on YouTube. Shout out to you, Chase, and thank you for listening. Mm-hmm. What can the common viewer and Bitcoin holders do to help get others involved with this shift in the next few years? He says, I want to get involved more and help people that need it.
So first, help yourself. Make sure you have Bitcoin and that you're using it regularly. And what I would do is, what I've done is everywhere I go, I mention it. Even if I'm in a store that I know doesn't accept it, I just kind of mention like, it would be easier if it was Bitcoin. Like I go to some places out here in LA and they're cashless. And I'm like, well, then why don't you have Bitcoin as an option? And then most of them know what I'm talking about, but they're like, well, we can't do it right now because we just can't. And, just talking about it is pretty paramount because some people just want to hear another person thinking the same way they do. So just saying it out loud. I've got Uber drivers that accept it, people that accept it for tips, different restaurants. Just talking about it is the best way to start. And then dollar cost average using Swan, which to me is the best service, and keeping skin in the game because you will be a big believer if you have money in it. You will do some sort of outreach and try to show people how to use it. Once you've used it, you can't go back. You go down the rabbit hole, you realize how great it is. That's the best way to get involved.
You know what else is interesting to kind of add to that is, I think a lot of people may get discouraged when they start trying to spread Bitcoin to people, because like you'll talk to a shop owner or somebody, and granted, like you never want to be too pushy about it, but I think like, don't take the world on your shoulders. If you go to a bar, you go to a Starbucks, wherever, you talk to somebody and mention Bitcoin and they're like, it's not for me right now. That's fine, because guess what? The next time a Bitcoiner goes in there and talks to them, it'll be the second time or the third time, and eventually they're going to pay attention. So, it's not an individual thing. It's a collective thing.
Yep.
Max, what do you think somebody can do who really wants to help Bitcoin grow and get out there more? What's the best, your advice for that person?
Nothing. The protocol's genius is self-contained, and when we go through big price moves, it brings in 1 million more users, and then it plateaus, and then it makes another big price move. So the protocol is hacking humanity. The difficulty adjustment is hacking the human species. And it finds the sweet spot every 2 weeks between greed and fear. And it sets out the parameters for the protocol. And the hash rate keeps going higher, and the price keeps going higher. And it keeps dominating more of the global energy business, more of the global computational abilities, and will pull in more fiat. So this black hole that's pulling all fiat and all energy into it, it's going to happen. And I think, ironically, humans might not be around when Bitcoin hits $100,000 a coin or $400,000 a coin, because we have stupidly committed species-wide suicide with our stupidity. But Bitcoin doesn't need us. We need Bitcoin. And don't try to change Bitcoin. Bitcoin changes you. and it's going to keep going, whether we're around here or not. It doesn't need us. It's just going to keep going because it is just basically the protocol is growing in that way. And, I can talk more about that, but there's nothing now that's going to stop it. It's already transforming businesses, transforming people's lives all over the world. You got 80 or 90 million users around the world. That number's growing pretty high. It's got 65% of the market cap in the crypto space. It's got 85% of the hash rate. It's got 90% of the volume. All those numbers are going to go to 99%, right? It's going to get 99% of everything and keep growing. It's like every money meets a messaging app, right? Those two things are like putting gasoline on a fire. I mean, this thing is everything resisted. Software has transformed everything in everyone's lives now for a few decades. The last holdout that hadn't been utterly transformed by software was money itself. In 2009, the fuse was lit, right? Money stopped being what it was for thousands of years, and it became something different and much better and does what it's supposed to do much better. And now it's happening whether we like it or not, whether we're going to be here to enjoy it or not. I think people just need to chill out and understand that things are going to be a lot better now and get on with getting along. Get along to get along. This whole Black Lives Matter movement is a great opportunity for race relations in America to calm the fuck down, because Bitcoin is going to make everyone's life better, but not if we're out in the street shooting each other. That's fucked up.
But Max, I can't calm down about Bitcoin. Sorry, Zay. I'll hand it back to you in just a second. I can't calm down about Bitcoin. It's it's organically incentivizing all of us, you include all of us here included, to educate, to market this thing. So yeah, I agree, it's inevitable, but Bitcoin is stuck with us Bitcoiners shouting from the rooftops as much as it can. I don't know if it'll do much good, but I hope that it'll make a smoother transition. That's my hope. Zay, what were you going to say?
Yeah, I was gonna say, it always confuses me how people can be racist when they are getting fucked by the Fed just like we are. I'm like, why are we not fighting at the same time?
Because they don't know it.
Yeah, exactly. I'm like, what are we doing? Like, what are you even talking about? So it always is funny to me to see that and then say, yeah, but you're still broke. Like, what are we even talking about here? So yeah, it's just funny to see that going forward. And Bitcoin, I think, is not going to solve racism, but as far as changing the money, yeah, it'll definitely change mindset. And when we feel like we're all in this together, that's when you'll start to see people calm the fuck down, as Max so eloquently put it.
Yeah. All right. I want to go back to a quote from the IAmTheCharacter Bitcoin speech that he made. He said that the legacy financial system is used to oppress us. And Zay, I want to ask you, what was the response to, your book before these protests came about, and how has that changed since we've, seen people holding up signs, advertising basically your book or recommending your book at these protests?
Oh yeah, so I do want to give a shout out to Max. He did the first interview for the book the day it came out, July 11th of last year. So the reception after Max did the interview, and then with Anthony Pompliano on his podcast, the reception was great when it first came out. The problem was, much like Max back in 2011, it was sort of ahead of its time. It came out during a dead period of Bitcoin. It wasn't any excitement. It wasn't, all this, how everybody gets all hyped up, FOMO, and then on price and starts looking up different Bitcoin products. So it was a year before this happened, but I've had the idea for about 4 years now. And when it came out, the reception was great. But the reason I think it's picking up now is because of the protests. People are starting to examine, okay, what are we actually doing here? And I think Bitcoin can be one of those solutions. But it was great reception before, nothing like the last couple of weeks. But people who read it liked it. That's all I cared about. It wasn't as many people, but all I cared about is that it stuck. That if you read it, you liked it, and you were able to come up with a solution. It's a solution-based book. It's pretty short so that you can get through it and then start doing shit, which is why I wrote it like that. So the reception was great before. Just more people were catching on. Like I always say, overnight success takes years. So,
yeah,
a lot of people are like, oh, where did this book come from? And I was like, it's been around. The idea's been around for some time. But yeah, reception's been great, and just glad to see it moving forward.
So at the end of the book, you talk about blockchain, and it's I think it's at blockchain.com. Is that right? Blockchain.co.
Blockchainonline, .com.
Oh, okay, right, gotcha. Okay, can you talk to us a little bit about blockchain? What are you doing with that?
Oh yeah, yep. So we're still in beta testing mode right now. Sort of bringing the vision about that I spoke about before, investing in businesses using Bitcoin. The regulation hurdles are ridiculous. I mean, just the research we've done and building everything is a hurdle in the U.S. We may actually think about taking it out of the country because there are some economies that need it right now, and we can facilitate it in smaller countries. But blockchain is a way for businesses, small businesses, to get loans in Bitcoin for their business. And it's building a circular economy, because when you get that loan, you have to buy supplies. There will also be available to purchase from different people peer-to-peer on an exchange. So those things are basically just trying to build a circular economy from scratch. And marketing wise, I'm marketing towards Black-owned businesses, but it is for everyone. Anybody can use the platform, and everybody can accept Bitcoin. So jumping to those regulation hurdles have been a thing, but blockchain will be coming this year, 2020.
Nice. Excited to look at that. Another practical solution. Your book is focused on practical solutions, which I really appreciate. And, you're putting your effort and time where your words are from that book. And I appreciate that, man. Yeah.
So I have a question, Isaiah. Kind of ties into what we were just talking about, and also ties into the Black Lives Matter movement and everything that's going on. How can white people, how can privileged people and classes, how can they be allies? What can we do? Here in LA, I see tons of, which I think is a good thing in general. I see tons of, signs on houses, we support you. I'm not Black, but I see you, but we're with you. And part of me initially was like, that kind of seems like virtue signaling. But then I was like, you know what? It's better than them not being there, those signs. But, what are real things that people can do? And one other thing I say is I think a good place to start is just by acknowledging these things, because most people don't, they don't talk about it. Would love to hear your thoughts on this.
Oh yeah. So I think the first step has been achieved, acknowledging it. I think everybody can acknowledge it now. So, all right, we got that out the way, because some people still thought Black people were just talking out of their ass for years. But now at least we've acknowledged it. So if you want to go forward, the first thing is consistency. Everything every white person is doing now, keep doing it. Don't stop because the protests stop and people stop talking about it. Everything you're doing now, just keep doing it. Stay vigilant. Also, the money aspect of it. Economically, of course, Bitcoin, I think, is a solution. But venture capitalists, a lot of the wealth in this country is in businesses and startups that venture capitalists help fund. And 99% of venture capital money goes away from the Black community. Only 1% of their venture capitalist money goes towards Black founders and Black co-founders and Black women. So one of the things I would like to see is that venture capitalists at least look at Black-owned businesses, at least bring them in to pitch, at least acknowledge that they exist, because a lot of the software that a lot of Black entrepreneurs are building just needs money. It's not a lack of ideas, a lack of work. Venture capitalists have to take a deep look inside and think to themselves, is every great company owned by 4 white dudes? No, that's just not the case. And being in the tech world, there's a bevy of talented developers and businesses. They just don't get the attention. Nobody looks their way, and they either have to shut down or they have to succumb to joining a company and giving them their talent, like Google or Facebook. So I think, money-wise, just social-wise, just stay consistent with the message. And money-wise, VCs start looking to invest in these companies. I am in no way asking any white people to just start handing Black people money. I saw that bullshit in Seattle where there was every white person give a Black person $10. Don't hand me $10 and like I'm some guy on the street. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about just recognizing the problem. And then once you do, the investment part, it comes easy, because then you start realizing, statistically, Black women founders are more successful than any other group. Like, why would I not invest in them more? So it's just paying attention to the facts that have presented themselves, and the money does help with that.
There's one other thing I wanted to add, and it ties into the idea of acknowledging things. How do I say this? Basically, a long time ago, and for background, I'm Jewish by background, and for a while I considered myself white. And then I read this article that was basically saying that Jews should not consider themselves white, and here are the reasons. And I found it incredibly interesting. And basically, it was that you know, maybe up until about the middle of this past century, most Jews were not assimilated. You know, they lived in their own communities. They dressed. You kind of knew what they looked like based on the way they dressed. And then something changed where Jews decided to start assimilating, to start wearing normal clothing, and to basically pass themselves as white in order to gain the advantages of, you know, white privilege. And I think this is something that a lot of people don't think about, but like America is a melting pot, right? Like if you're Italian or you're Irish or you're any of these all these different cultures and peoples that like are now lumped in the white category, like it was not always that way you know, only recently did these things change, you know? So remember where you came from. Remember that like there are other people who are in a similar position and, you know, can't pass themselves off for privilege as easily, you know? So, you know, I don't know. I just thought that was important.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Whiteness is, that was kind of created and it was created with money. It wasn't like a social thing. It was like, well, yeah, white people can get loans and you look white. So there we go. Italian, Russian, Jewish, it doesn't matter. So it was created. Trust me, it was very fabricated because you're right. Ellis Island, it was a whole lot of immigrants that got discriminated against when they first got here in the 20s. And then all of a sudden in the 40s and 50s, they started getting loans and they are part of society. That's just how shit works. And it's very recent. People keep saying it's old. My grandmother was born in 1927. So it's not old. People still living that saw that time.
Yeah, well, in the United States, though, you have what I would call the racism industry, right? So the racism industry in America is huge. For example, the prison industry is driven primarily by racism. We know that prisons around the country do deals with local municipalities where they will take over the cost of running those prisons if the cops in that municipality guarantee occupancy. 98 to 100% occupancy of those prisons, those private prisons. And so they do things like pass laws, 3-strike laws. You go to prison, they change the drug laws in certain ways. So the easiest population to put in prison, if you have an interest rate apartheid state in like you do in America, are the Black population. So now you've got huge numbers of Black males in prison in America as part of this, what I would call the racism industry. So how do you get past that? Well, you've got to defund the racism industry. And this is where Bitcoin could be strategic and impactful in that suddenly there's going to be a mad scramble to get into this gold rush called Bitcoin. And the industry simply moves on from the easy money of building prisons and arresting Black people, which is incredibly profitable for the private prison industry, which is a publicly listed companies on America, and they pay the executives millions and millions of dollars to go arrest Black people and put them in prison. That's their charter. That's their mandate. That's what shareholders demand. It's an industry. But you need something that's more competitive, that's going to make people more money. That's where Bitcoin comes in, because if all fiat money is collapsing and all these institutions are collapsing and there's a mad rush to Bitcoin, suddenly racism is not as profitable anymore. And you've got something else to do. That's the only way forward, because as long as the culture, the economy, and the politics support this apartheid state in America, there's going to be no change.
You know, and I just want to go a little deeper. Oh, sorry. I wanted to go a little deeper on that. The prison population. As a former teacher, the school to prison pipeline, they literally build prisons based off 3rd grade test scores. That was one of the first things they told us as a teacher, because what they figured was that if you can't read sufficiently by the time you're in 3rd grade, you're probably not going to be able to do it by 8th grade. You're probably going to be a criminal by high school. That's literally what they figured out. And they build prisons based off of that. And if you have an education system that's poor in these neighborhoods, you're usually going to be able to figure out who's not going to be educated, and then maybe move on to something where they may do crime later. But yes, that is literally built on racism, and they have statistics. These people are not dumb. They have statistics, and they have all of the manpower to carry it through, and they've been doing it. So yeah.
Right. There's no break. There's no break between slavery in America, Jim Crow laws in America, and the prison industrial complex. There's no break. This is one continuum of racism and attempted genocide, essentially. Okay, so those are the facts. Now, what's going to change? Well, you've got to change the profit incentive. You've got to make it more profitable to get out of the racism business. That's the only way it's going to change. So that's where Bitcoin can be impactful, because it destroys all the current institutions. It destroys the fiat money. It destroys the interest rate apartheid. So now we have a new business model, and now suddenly people are like, well, racism isn't profitable for me anymore. I'm going to move on, do something else. And that's how you get the change. You can't do it without sound money, though. You can't do it without real money, without Bitcoin. As long as fiat money's around, you're going to have this problem.
Love the fire you guys are bringing. This is inspiring stuff. Zay, what resources do you recommend to Bitcoiners, right? Besides your book, if somebody wants to dive down deeper in the rabbit hole, they're sold. What resources did you trust when you were learning Bitcoin, and what do you recommend now to new coiners?
So the first few books I read, Mastering Bitcoin from Andreas Antonopoulos. I'm pretty sure I've seen every Andreas Antonopoulos video that's ever come out. My first video introduction to Bitcoin was the RT report from Max. Also making sure you read books like the Bitcoin Standard. Let's see, it's so many out there that are so good that I started with building Bitcoin websites. I mean, I've probably read every Bitcoin book there is, but I would say those resources as well as YouTube channels such as ours or others, that literally every day or every week tell you about the market, describe to you what to do updates wise. So those are some of them, but I would say Andreas Antonopoulos is a great start. If you watch all his videos, you pretty much have a grasp on how it works. And follow that up with videos from people like Max, people like Sinclair Skinner from Bitmari, some of his message as well. So yes, it's some great resources out there, and I'll start there.
Nice. Max, what about you, man?
I would
Keiser report.
I would direct people's attention to a brilliant 10-part series called To the Moon, which was written and produced by Stacy Herbert last year. It's now online. It covers the first 10 years of Bitcoin, and it gives a kind of a deep dive into the first 10 years of Bitcoin, gives you great background, and gets into the personalities, the technology. We had on our show Keiser Report. Of course, we've had just about anyone in Bitcoin has been on that show, starting in 2011, when we, that's been really the background music to the Bitcoin revolution, has been the Keiser Report, if I will make that statement. So anyway, that series is a great encapsulation that Stacy, of course, everyone knows, is a genius producer and director, and this is her masterpiece. It's called To the Moon. You can find it online.
Shout out to Stacy. Love you, Stacy.
I think everybody loves Stacy. It's hard not to. I'm embarrassed to say, though, I haven't seen that, Max. So I'm going to go watch it. I'm putting it to the top of my list. I'm going to quickly shill two books that I love. Inventing Bitcoin by Jan Pritzker, our CTO. It was my favorite book before I joined Swan. I just think it's so short and to the point, and gets you to really understand how Bitcoin works and why it's important, from a really interesting kind of ground level to, building perspective. And then another one is Gigi's 21 Lessons. There's an audiobook version. It's really short. You just learn from a great Bitcoiner. So if you don't know about that one, go check it out.
Yeah, I love 21 Lessons. It sits on my nightstand. It's one of those that I can just flip open and read a chapter, and I love Gigi's writing style. And I should also shout out Why Buy Bitcoin by Andy Edstrom. He has written a book that's like, if somebody's looking to invest in Bitcoin, like they're sold and they're ready to go, this is the book to give them on like the strategies, investing strategies, and getting into Bitcoin, and the case for investing in Bitcoin, just to really like underline and underscore that. So all right, let's close up with a topic that I've been interested in lately. Like, we've talked about how Bitcoin is kind of poised to really like reshape the American economy, hopefully improve the situation, especially economically, for Black America. Let's go internationally. And I know, Zay, you have a chapter in your book called International Cooperation. And I know Max will have some thoughts on this as well. How do you think Bitcoin is going to reshape the geopolitical globe and like, economic world economic system?
Yeah. So, well, one of the things I've noticed with the U.S. is we are spoiled. We don't think it can happen to us. We don't think our dollar can be debased, because nobody really alive in the U.S. has seen, the debasement of the dollar, because nobody was around in 1913. So one of the things that I've noticed internationally is that they get it instantly. It's not like you have to convince them. As soon as you say there's a money system that can combat government corruption, they're all for it, because they've seen government corruption. So one of the things I want to see going forward, that we will see going forward in countries like Kenya and in countries like South Korea, they're ahead of us, way ahead of us, as far as digitally and as far as using Bitcoin. That is something that they will pick up faster. And to have a circular economy, you're going to have to combat colonialism from some of these European countries, but a lot of these African countries can do that with Bitcoin. And I think we'll start to see that once the money system is going, once the infrastructure is there. It's a lot to do, but nobody is relying on the government anymore in any country. So international cooperation is vital, in my opinion.
Max, let's hear the fire, man.
Well, I think the way Bitcoin's going to change geopolitics is we're going to, the question is always, what if a government bans Bitcoin? What if governments ban it? What are we going to do? I don't think that's likely at all, because first of all, they really can't. But what I see to be the more likely outcome, it would be a global hash war. So governments are going to start to accumulate Bitcoin, and other governments are going to realize this is like a Sputnik moment. There's going to be a race to try to control as much Bitcoin as possible. And we already see it now with Iran. Iran has got a significant part of global hash rate right now. They're not trying to come up with their own dedicated country currency. They realize that that's a fool's errand. They're going after Bitcoin. And so once that word gets out, and maybe the US or the Great Britain or a European country will say, wait a minute, we can't let Iran become the richest country in the world with the hardest money ever, right? We've got to get some Bitcoin. So this will start a global hash war. And this means the security of the coin goes up exponentially, which means the price goes up exponentially. This is how we get to $400,000, $500,000 a coin. This is why it is parallel to gold in many ways. So the global hash war, I think we're going to see that break out in the next 6 to 9 months.
And kind of as a corollary to the global hash war, we're just going to see the money printers keep going burr to fund this hash war.
Right, and that just makes their fiat money, less valuable, right? They're going to debase their fiat money to try to compete in the hash war. And of course, gold will become a huge factor. So gold is like a handmaiden to the global hash war, because a few countries like China and Russia have been buying a huge number, hundreds and hundreds of tons of gold in the last 10 to 15 years. And in fact, they're in an excellent position for this global hash war, because they'll be like selling gold for hash power instead of fiat money, and they'll be able to buy a lot more hash power with gold than you can fiat money. It's like when gold was $140 a barrel, Russia was converting its oil into gold, right? The oil gold conversion was in Russia's favor in a huge way. And now with the oil price down the way it is, they're not really suffering like other countries, because they accumulated a huge gold position, unlike Saudi Arabia, for example, that doesn't really have any gold to speak of, meaningful. So now think about that in terms of hash wars and gold. Those countries with a lot of gold gives them a lot of buying power to buy hash rate. Those countries with like Canada has no gold whatsoever. Great Britain sold half their gold. They have less than 300 tons now. Those countries are going to be at a huge disadvantage in a global hash war. So the fiat money, of course, becomes increasingly worthless. Only keep money in fiat that you're willing to lose.
I love that.
All right, we got a question from the Telegram chats. Al's Lacrosse, shout out Al. The question is for Zay: do you think Bitcoin faces inherent suspicion from the Black community?
Yes, because as a financial asset, as a financial tool in the Black community, a lot of times we have had people come into our community, tell us to invest in certain things, trust them with our money, and it never works out, or it doesn't work out like we thought. So there is that sort of suspicion with Bitcoin. Also, a lot of Black people get their news from mainstream media. Unfortunately, they don't really have any other outlet to get it than from cable mainstream media. So when they hear it from them, they think that that's a fact, which is sort of why we've been led astray, and why I make the analogy that if you think about how Black people are misrepresented in mainstream media, that's how Bitcoin is. And once you say that, a lot of Black people are understanding like, oh yeah, that makes sense, because half of the time they, put us as criminals or thugs, or we're doing something crazy, and it's like, that's not me, that's not my family, that's not anybody I know. Like, what are you talking about? And I think that's what's happened with Bitcoin in the media. And yeah, going forward, I think that analogy and being able to get Black people to realize that will get rid of the suspicion and get them to realize that if anything is actually worth if it's worth something, then the media is going to bash it, or banks are going to try and bash it. And that should actually be encouraging, because if they're not going against it, then they don't have a problem with it, and you're not fighting against them. So the fact that they are should be encouraging. The suspicion is slowly moving away, because a lot of Black people are just tired. They're just tired of everything that they've been told or sold. This is like a perfect storm, actually.
All right. Thanks, Isaiah. I think we're about done here. Unless anybody else can throw in some chats in questions into the chat, we'll go to some closing comments. Isaiah, we'll close up with you, but we'll start with Max here to give some closing comments. Brecky, feel free to jump in as well. Max, got any inspiration for us?
Well, I love the fact that Bitcoin and Black America, Isaiah's book, as he points out, he came out in a year ago or so, and now suddenly it's really become a hot topic and a hot book. And this is a great thing about a book, is that it can stay on the shelf a while and then find an audience like that. And when I started reading all these references and seeing signs, in crowds, read this book, Bitcoin and Black America, I was like, oh my God, this is so fantastic, and I think that's an inspiration right there for folks. People have been saying to me I should write a book now for 10 years. I keep procrastinating. I'm like, damn it, I got to write my book now. So anyway, kudos to Isaiah. This thing is a rocket ship. It's awesome. I think the next year it's just going to get bigger and bigger.
Heck yeah, man.
Appreciate that, Max. I think you got the title for your book on your shirt.
Agreed. You'll have to sell it direct. Amazon won't take that.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, we have one more question coming in from Corey. Brecky, you want to close in? It's about ready to post up here. Brecky, do you have anything you want to close out with? You're on mute.
There I am. So I'll just say this. I agree with Max, something Max said earlier, that, this Bitcoin future is inevitable 100%. But, we're all doing what we do because we believe that we can hasten it. We can get there quicker. We can educate people who need it. We don't need the corporate fat cats to adopt Bitcoin right now. We need people in disenfranchised communities to adopt it right now among various communities. So if you're a Bitcoiner, and there are people in your lives who you haven't already bored to death with Bitcoin, talk to them about it. Tell them why it's important to you, and, change some hearts and minds.
Nice. All right, here's the question with Corey, from Corey, and then we'll finish up with Isaiah. The question is, with Bitcoin, driverless cars, faster internet speeds, remote work, online ordering, delivery of everything, how and where will we all live in the future? Will we have Bitcoin citadels, city-states, or much more widely dispersed population spreading out into rural America? Max, what do you think?
Well, the worst case scenario is what I call the casino gulag. So the casino gulag is we're all basically forced to stay in our home and try to click on enough ads on the web to get a protein pill. And it's all based on games of chance. And, the stock market has turned into a complete farce, right? So Hertz, the car rental company, is bankrupt. They're selling stock, billions of dollars worth of stock in a bankrupt company. It's never been done before. And the Robinhood traders are trading it because it's a total disconnect between the gamification of the stock market and the economy. So you've got these Robinhood Gen Z forced to stay in their cells. They can't go outside, trying to make a buck so they can order in a pizza. So it's like, but it's with a total gambling security like a Hertz, which is a nonsensical nonsense gambling lottery ticket. So it's a casino gulag, is what I see is this dystopian nightmare coming to reality. On the positive side, I think that I see a big battle brewing, and that's a battle for energy. And the big tech giants are getting better at perpetrating the casino gulag. And the way that they're going to get better at it is by co-opting artificial intelligence, or AI. And this is a huge energy drain as well. So I see there's going to be a battle between AI versus Bitcoin for who owns the dominant global energy supply. And my money is on Bitcoin. I think Bitcoin is our only hope as humans to defeat AI and the technological panopticon against a perpetual casino gulag state of misery. That's my take.
When's the movie coming out?
It's playing in my mind 24/7. I can't get out of it. I've been living in this movie for years.
A glimpse into Max's mind. What about you, Isaiah? Do you think, how do you think Bitcoin is going to affect the way we live?
Oh yeah. So yeah, I definitely agree with Max. I've always said that to people that, for humans, they may not understand Bitcoin, but AI does, and they will be using cryptocurrencies or Bitcoin in the future. So that battle will be there energy wise. But I think in the future, what we'll see is the adoption from governments like China or Russia, maybe as a store of value. And I think we will see exponential growth simply because of that. It's only going to take one major country to say that we're backing up our currency with the hardest money there is. And then everybody's going to copy just like before. I think we'll see that. Well, I think we'll also see the movement of people from cities, because like I said, this is sort of a perfect storm because of COVID, because of rising rent prices, because of the ability to work from home. I think people will move to rural areas, and that Bitcoin citadels are possible, but it'll be more communities of people that are like, hey, we use Bitcoin. We may use this government currency, but as a community, we use Bitcoin because we understand that it works. So I think we'll start to see that more. Actually thinking of plans myself to have something like an embassy or some sort of place where, you can sort of pass ideas. But yeah, I definitely see that in the future. And I think people are getting smarter, so they realize that the need for this is now.
Absolutely, man. And I completely agree with that. I see Bitcoin driving people into smaller groups, smaller communities. I don't really know my neighbors that well, and I know a few people in my community, but they live far away from me, other edges of town, et cetera. We always get together. I just see Bitcoin kind of bringing together, the way that we used to live in communities in America, where we're looking out for each other. We're more independent, right? We're more have a personal responsibility. We share that responsibility with the community. If someone's suffering in your community, you come together to help them out, as opposed to rely on, a larger institution that's sort of separated from the community, far from the community, to take care of them. So that's my kind of hopeful view of a Bitcoin future. All right. So I think we'll wrap up there. I just want to say really quickly, swansignal podcast.com is where you can subscribe to this as a podcast. We're also on YouTube at youtube.com/swansignal. Isaiah, I'm going to give you the floor to take us out, man.
Oh yeah. I just want to encourage everybody who has read Bitcoin in Black America, keep pushing forward. Thank you for the support. And going forward in the future, only going to keep the pressure on the people who have been our oppressors, the Federal Reserve, and making sure that our money is valuable in the future. So keep buying Bitcoin, keep pushing forward, and definitely look out for the 1-year anniversary, July 11th of Bitcoin in Black America, 2nd edition coming out.
Exciting, man.